I've been on the water about 30 years now. Here in Kassiesbaai, there's no other business. Here there's only fishing. There's no other way of life. My father was a fisherman, grandfather, fisherman, uncles, all fishermen. Fishermen used to be the anchor of the community. Back in those days, there was plenty of fish. But now, fish are scarce, and times are tough. Actually, around here we don't really have so many different species. We mainly go for red Roman, black stumpnose, red steenbras, aardekop, silverfish, and then in the season, geelbek, yellowtail, kabeljou, and sharks. In the old days, we used to work out there in the east, where the Werp Reserve is now. We had the right to fish there, and after a time they put a stop to that. Now we're not allowed to work there anymore, and that's where our fish are. They told us we had to go out to sea 3 miles from the high water mark and work in that area. But what are you going to catch there?
Wat ga je daar vangen?
Already by the late 1960s, early 1970s, the rate at which fishermen were taking fish out of the sea exceeded their capacity to replace themselves. And it was necessary to do something. And right around the coastline now, we've got a number of these protected areas. In much the same way that we need protected areas on land, places like Kruger Park, Kalahari, etc., we also need to protect parts of the sea for very much the same set of reasons. And De Hoop is one of the ones where we were able to show quite convincingly that the fish populations rebounded very strongly after fishing had been removed. De Hoop runs between the mouth of the Breede River and Arniston. It's basically this area here from the point 3 nautical miles out to over here somewhere.
Look, we know that we need the reserves to protect the resource, the small fish. But we as fishermen also know that we can't keep the small fish. We have to put them back.
Yeah, outside of De Hoop, on both sides, east and western side, as I said, there's quite a bit of fishing going on, and typically you'll find there's maybe only 10 or 20% of the abundance of fish there compared to what you would find inside a place like De Hoop. Because fish spawn every year of their life, and some of these fish might live to 20, 30 years, When you reduce their lifespan, it basically means they've got less opportunity to produce eggs. That in turn reduces the capacity of the fish stock to replace itself. You see that outside of the protected areas. There's just not enough big fish to produce eggs, and so you get a collapse of the fish stock. And the reason we have the protected areas is, of course, to maintain those old fish, that they can spawn every year, and those eggs and fish larvae will actually drift outside of the protected area and replenish the areas outside. Of course, if you don't have that replenishment, you insist on harvesting all around the coastline, well, then the fishing will collapse very, very soon.
I'm 36 years old. I was born here. My life, my parents, and my family are all here. When I was a child, I really looked up to the fishermen. As kids, we used to say we want to be like our fathers, the fishermen. They were our idols. All through the years, our people fished around the fish kraals where the fish were breeding. That was our tradition. The fishermen packed the kraals themselves. And as I said, there were no restrictions back then. When the fish were small, we knew to put them back. Now their big thing is we're going to destroy the whole resource at the Hoop.
We know that when you fish part of the ocean, what tends to happen is you remove the biggest fish and the high-order predators first. They're the aggressive ones. They're the ones that get to your bait first. And in very much the same way as removing all the lions from Kruger Park, you can expect a massive change in the ecosystem. What's happened at places like De Hoop is that the natural balance has restored itself, in that those high-order predators have returned and the ecosystem functions in a way that it used to 100, 200 years ago.
Back then, when the government took our rights away, there was no consultation with the fishermen. They just closed areas and reduced the seasons. Our people used to sail from Arniston to Kassiesbaai to fish. The government didn't even bother to tell us the areas were closed. They just closed them and fined us if they caught us in the reserves, which were never reserves in the past.
Hulle was nog nooit hier in Kassiesbaai.
They never came to Kassiesbaai to ask us about the breeding of the fish, sizes of the fish. They just make decisions on their own. There's only one man from Kassiesbaai who's actually employed by the De Hoop Reserve. If we stray into the reserve, he's the man who comes after us.
Dis die man wat ons daar kokkery.
The handline fishery has got a greater capacity to target species relative to, say, trawl, which is quite a broad spectrum method. So you'll tend to get, overall, more species caught in a trawl than you would in a handline. The skipper on the handline boat is able to target specific species to a higher degree. Still, they will have quite a substantial impact on predominantly the reef-associated species.
When a big ship with nets comes into our waters, they take most of our fish away. Because, they have these huge trawl nets. Now, how can the government say they have no impact on our waters? They've got a big impact.
One species that is caught by both the line fishermen and trawlers is, of course, silver cob. It's a target of the line fishery, whereas the trawl fishery does pick it up as bycatch. They're also marketed, although they don't target silver cobblers, so they can't really avoid it. But that's actually one of the few cases where there's overlap between these two fisheries.
The way things look now, I can't see a future in fishing for Kassiesbaai. Many of the youngsters who we thought would become fishermen aren't interested in going to sea anymore. So after 5 or 10 years, I don't know if the tradition will survive.
Once you allow fishermen in an area where there's a lot of fish, and I can tell you, just any kind of fishing, doesn't matter what it is. If you're going to be catching large quantities of fish, for the provision of food, there's going to be an ecological impact. There's no getting away from it. It just takes on different forms with different fisheries. That is exactly one of the reasons why we have protected areas. We can't allow fishermen to fish everywhere in the ocean. It just won't work. We'll just destroy everything. So we've got to keep some areas protected. Look, the commercial line fishing these days is really tough. Firstly, they're not catching nearly as much fish as they used to 50 or 60 years ago. There's just less fish available, largely because of overexploitation, but perhaps other reasons as well. To make a go of line fishing these days, as with any business, to be profitable, you've got to pay attention to the revenue, which is the amount of money you're going to make out of your fish, and the costs as well. So unfortunately these days the price of fuel is really, really high, much more so than in previous years, and the price of fish hasn't gone up to the same extent, which means that they really are struggling.
In our area, there's only one man who buys the fish from us. And he does what he wants with the boat owners and pays them what he feels like paying. That middleman wants to pocket his slice, and the man he sells the fish to wants to pocket his slice as well.
will say no, and this actually.
Traditional handline fishermen, I believe, can persist. They have to take on board modern practices. They have to try to break into modern markets if they're going to get the price they need. The method itself, there's nothing wrong with the method of fishing. The knowledge that they have of where to catch fish, when to go, what kind of equipment to use, for example, that's going to help them in the future, but they need to bring on more expertise on how to market their fish better.
Look, fishing is good work. It's just the prices beating us down. Our market is bitterly poor. If we could get another market with better prices, things will improve. But to get a system like that on the go, we'll need one or two of our men to step forward. If we could make the effort together, we could put things right. Fishing is a profitable business. I don't let anyone tell me there's no money in fishing. That's just nonsense. There's money in fishing.
That's geld of visvang.